Because 5-MeO-DMT is such a powerful substance with such a vast potential for inner transformation, it is very important that we use it in a responsible way. The difference between responsible use and reckless use is literally heaven and utter delusion. And it's not hard to use 5-MeO-DMT responsibly. This video will tell you everything you need to know. So let's jump into it by looking at the 3 tenets of why we actually use 5-MeO-DMT on the spiritual journey. Wanting to be happy is the one thing that unites all human beings, and so that is one of our most top conscious goals of what we're trying to achieve here. The value of serving others is less stressed in modern culture, but the Buddhists really figured this out. If we really want to be happy, we can't just constantly be taking from the world. Our hearts deeply want to give real value to others in an effective manner. We want to be functioning creatures that are contributing to the well-being of others. This deep desire for serving others actually comes about from a deep realization of unity, that we are all one, which makes us want to not only benefit our own physical bodies, but the souls and spirits of everyone else. And lastly, we are recognizing our deep desire to realize what we really are and our unlimited potential. Together, these 3 things, happiness, effective service, and insight, reveal to ourselves who we really are, our inner nature, our true nature, our Buddha nature. And this is what we are trying to achieve by using such a powerful spiritual substance of 5-MeO-DMT. So let's start at the beginning, and that is with the route of administration and answering the question of how you can get the sacred substance of 5-MeO-DMT into your body. Now, by far the most popular way of doing it is through smoking by using some sort of a flame. Now, this is probably not going to cut it. You need to reach very high temperatures. You can figure out the logistics of that, but you might need some sort of a specialized vape or a specialized crystal bong. But the downside of this technique is really the health effects, and it's really harsh on your lungs. And for me, those negative health effects really do come through in the trip and make it less pleasant. Now, the trip also, this is something very noticeable, will be very short in duration, maybe 5 minutes of peak and then another 5 more minutes of a tail. And the come up will be extremely quick as well. In the matter of a second or two, you're going to be launched into another dimension. Now, another technique, a mystery technique, is better in a lot of ways. Number one is that it lasts much longer, 30 to 40 minutes, using the same amount of chemical, and the peak is going to be nearly the same as well. The onset is much more gentle and the tail is more long, so that you have more time to integrate and learn from the experience. Also, because of the way that you put it into your body, this mystery technique, it has absolutely no negative health effects. Now, something to notice is that with the smoking technique, you're going to use the freebase version of 5-MeO-DMT, whereas in the mystery technique, you're going to be using the salt version of 5-MeO-DMT. If you have the freebase version, you can easily convert to the salt version by simply adding vinegar, and you know which one you have because if you add just pure water to it, the salt version will dissolve, whereas the freebase version will not. Now, as to what this mystery technique is, I'm not going to talk about it in this video because, quite frankly, I'm too embarrassed to. And I'll link in the description someone else who did a perfect job of describing how this process works and how you can use it to your best of use. So the next thing on the list is to figure out the dosage. Now, the main thing I want to get across is that there is no magical dosage that will deliver a certain result. It entirely depends on your personal biology and on the exact batch of chemical that you have. But having said that, we'll run through the common dosages and what you can expect. But what I really want to stress is that if you respect the substance at all, which you really should, you should start at a low dosage and then slowly ramp up to see how your body reacts. Now, the lowest dose that I'm going to talk about is 8 milligrams, which is very, very small. And here we have a 20 milliliter scoop, which is extremely tiny. And very roughly, 8 milligrams is about 3/4 of a scoop. So we're going to be working in fractions of a scoop, which is really why you need a milligram scale like this, but we'll be coming back to that in a while. So 8 milligrams is already as strong as a really good tab of acid. It's definitely going to have strong effects, and you're going to be able to do a lot of good inner work with 8 milligrams, and it's a very clean trip. And if you do it with the mystery technique I mentioned, 30 to 40 minutes is really a lot you can do. If you open up to the experience, a lot of healing can happen in a very controlled way that's not going to be overwhelming. The next sort of dosage in my mind is 11 milligrams. This is like a very strong acid trip or a very strong mushroom trip. Things are going to start getting quite hazy. The body load could become a lot stronger, and this is definitely a dose where shifts are going to happen within you, and it's still good for, more radical experiences of consciousness and exploring more abstract things, but still it's more of an element of control and less crazy. So now we're going to jump up to another milestone in my dosage guide, which is 16 milligrams. And here it's a good point to mention that scaling up your dosage is not linear at all. And in fact, increasing by 5 milligrams, usually very roughly, almost doubles the experience that you're going to be having. The intensity of the experience, your subjective experience. So moving from 11 to 16 is almost like doubling your subjective effects. And at 16 milligrams, things get very, very abstract. At the lower dosages, you can really explore, I find, personal issues, your personal life story, and how things relate in your life. Excuse me. But at 16 milligrams, these things tend to fall away because it becomes so abstract. You're going to be delving more into questions of what is consciousness. The mind is going to start melting away. You could start phasing into different spaces. And here you want to be really open to the experience. And I would suggest that you just keep reminding yourself to open up to the experience and to not fight it. 60 milligrams can be very beautiful. If you've had some experience of the lower dosages or with normal DMT, you'll be fine. Just open up to love. But be aware that here we're talking about some very intense experiences. And now moving up to the next increment of 21 milligrams. Here we're starting to get very intense, and I wouldn't, if I were you, jump straight into this. It can be an extremely heart-opening, loving experience, and there are many very interesting things that will happen, but it's not going to be sort of related to your normal life in any way at all, or it could be, but you can expect it to be extremely abstract. You're probably going to be entering another space, and overall it's going to be such an intense experience that you're going to be zinging from it for probably days to come. You can really integrate the experience over weeks. It's going to be very strong, and I guess it's hard to come across how big of a jump this is from the 16 milligram dose. The 21 milligrams, your mind, if you want to stay in this dimension, it's going to really struggle to just hold it together. Your mind is sort of like a puzzle, and at this dose, the puzzle is really going to be pulling itself apart. But don't worry at all. Just open up to the experience, because as soon as that puzzle breaks apart, what's going to await you is lots and lots of love. Now, there are higher dosages that you can go to. For me, at around 16 to 20 milligrams, it is already so strong that I don't feel like you need to be going higher, because at this dosage I can feel like I'm sitting in the presence of the Buddha himself already, just in a space of pure golden love with cheeks radiating beauty, just to be poetic. So I don't really see the point of going crazy with dosages higher than this, because if you're interested in self-development, these dosages are so profound and so powerful that you really don't need to be doing anything reckless. Let me just close this door for the dogs. Okay, hopefully the dog's barking is less now. So, if you want to go higher than 21 milligrams, perhaps you could, because maybe your biology is different, maybe you're not so sensitive, but I would be very cautious, because this is such a powerful and sacred substance. We want to fully respect it, and we need to be doing the work ourselves to be opening up to love and beauty. And I think if you have the right approach and a strong clarity, you can really do a huge amount of 21 milligrams. But remember again that doubling your dosage or doubling your subjective effect, you only add an extra 5 milligrams. So I've never gone above 22 milligrams, but if you go to 25 or 26, you can expect absolutely craziness. This is the type of dose where I would suspect you will be meeting God itself. You will be utterly, profoundly changed. And this is a very daring thing to do. I wouldn't recommend it unless you've had thorough experience of lower dosages and just integrating those experiences over weeks. Now, as an absolute cap, I've heard that 30 milligrams is really where you start to white out, sort of like a blackout. And although crazy things probably do happen in your mind, at 30 milligrams, it seems to be that most people cannot recall absolutely anything of what happened in their trip. So 30 milligrams is an absolute cap, although I personally wouldn't recommend you go above 22 milligrams or 21 milligrams if you're interested in self-development work, because there's so much purification you can do at these lower dosages. And even going back to the beginning, you can do so much at 8 milligrams. It's such a beautiful love opening experience that if you allow the chemical to flood your nervous system, metaphorically to the tips of the leaves of the tree that you are, even an 8 milligram dose can do a huge amount for you. Now, as for measuring the substance, this is more tricky because, again, talking about the 8 milligram dose, that's only 3/4 of a scoop, and this is a really tiny scoop. And to make matters worse, this isn't accurate enough to use a scoop like this. It's good for basic reference, and you can basically think of it as one scoop, for me, of 20 milliliters being about 11 milligrams. But that's very rough, not good enough. So what you're going to be needing is a milligram scale, which measures thousandths of a milligram. So that's the benefit of 5-MeO. It's so powerful per the dosage, but it makes measurement a bit tricky. Now what you'll find is that with a basically cheap milligram scale like this, it's not actually super accurate, and it could have a plus minus of, I would say in my experience, maybe 3-4 milligrams even, which is quite a lot because of, as you remember, adding 5 extra milligrams almost doubles the subjective experience. So what you'll find is a lot of these come with a little weight like this, which is 10 milligrams. So what tends to work really well is you measure your weight into your little cup. Let's say you're aiming for 12 milligrams. Once you get 12, you put this in your container, and it should, because that's 10 grams, go to 10.012 grams. Now, if it doesn't, maybe it'll go to 10.010 grams. You can see there's some discrepancy, but you can sort of jump between the 10 grams extra and the no milligrams extra to find a more accurate average quantity. And my recommendation really overall with the measurement will be that you definitely need a milligram scale, but to spend maybe a bit more extra money than I did and to get a really nice quality milligram scale. To finish, I once again want to reiterate that if you have any sort of respect for this substance, and you really should, don't go jumping into high dosages. We're interested in this, I assume, I hope, for personal growth and spiritual development, and for that the lower dosages are really beautiful for doing that, and to experience more profound states of consciousness which are really akin to enlightenment itself, nirvana. These can be had at the 20 milligram range. There's no need to go into crazy dosages, but if you want to be experiencing nirvana and enlightenment, just start slow and ramp up over time. There's no rush to be getting there the first time or the second time, but especially the first time you're doing this substance. Just familiarize yourself with it, fully open up to the experience, and then just enjoy it. So just after filming that first section, I realized it's probably important to explain why it's a good idea to stay away from the truly high doses of 21 milligrams plus, especially if this is your first time. And that is basically because there are risks involved, and the Kundalini energy, if you've read about this, is a realistic threat, although something that it's a bit controversial. The Kundalini is not a bad force at all. It can be very beautiful, but it's a very primal energy, and what you really want to avoid is a runaway Kundalini activation, which does happen. The risk is small. What's more likely to happen, and this is commonly reported, is a whiteout, where everything goes white. You usually can't remember much, but it's still a good experience overall. People would say it was good, not bad, but your life really does matter. So I wouldn't recommend doing anything reckless. Rather have smaller experiences than a huge one where there is the risk of a runaway energy happening. Now, the Kundalini energy runaways, I've seen this in person. What can just really happen is all these primal energies within you of shouting, screaming, rolling around, hurting others, hurting yourself, they can come up. I don't really want to talk about it too much because it's a small risk, and it's better that you go into this experience with an open heart and expecting the best, because if that's your sincere intention, you will experience really divine states of openness and bliss and insights like you can't even imagine. So that is all as a by and by, because going back to the start, I would recommend a small 8 milligram dose, 11 milligram dose, and ramping it up from there slowly so that you know what you're in for. And on to now the setting, which is answering the question of where exactly are you going to be when you take 5-MeO DMT for the first time. Now, the two overarching themes to remember are you want to be in a space that you feel safe in and around people that you trust. Now, to go into the particulars, I feel like the best way to look at them is to go through the 5 senses. First of all, visually, you want to be in a nice open space that is well lit with natural lighting. And if you can surround yourself with beautiful objects that inspire your creativity and sense of beauty, that is perfect and absolutely fantastic. You will be surprised at how a beautiful image can really drastically, positively, and deeply affect the quality of your trip. In terms of sound, I would recommend a place that is very quiet as you can manage to find. And if you can have birds chirping in the background, that is absolutely perfect and would be amazing. If you want to play music, you can. If you do, I recommend playing something angelic or divine, because this is very immediately and focusedly going to affect what your trip is like. But I would recommend silence if you can, because it's going to be a more pure reflection of what is within you, which is, after all, what we're doing here. We're exploring our inner world. In terms of smell, this is a huge opportunity to positively direct where you are going to be going, and it gets you more into touch with this life force type energy within you. So I recommend burning some incense. In particular, frankincense is great, or burning Palo Santo is also absolutely fantastic into directing you towards very benevolent spiritual dimensions. In terms of taste, there's not too much to be said, but I would recommend having a clean mouth, brushing your teeth, and maybe flossing, just so that you feel fresh. And another big one is your feeling, your sense of touch. So the most obvious way to address that is by wearing nice clothes that you feel light and comfortable in, that are not too tight, but that you visually also like, that you think look good and inspire creativity or beauty. And as to where exactly you're going to be placed for your trip, I recommend being on a bed like so, laying down, symmetrical and open, with feet on a bolster. So being symmetrical and open is an important theme to remember in general when taking any psychedelic, because this openness is directly reflected in all aspects of your trip. Having your feet on a bolster, I also find, adds an element of lightness and airiness to the trip, which is very desirable. But also it's nice because if you decide that you do no longer feel like laying down, once the onset comes, maybe you feel like being more focused and having an upright spine like a meditator's pose, then there's a nice easy spot for you to immediately direct yourself to without having to find a place to sit during the peak of a trip. I'm back now from the future because I've thought of a few more tips that definitely need to be included, absolutely, in this All You Need to Know video. So the first of these is that if you have some sort of breakthrough experience that reveals to you with a lot of clarity what action you need to take in life, that's fantastic. But for pragmatic reasons, I'm going to suggest it's wise to wait 24 hours a day before you actually take a drastic action in life. For instance, you might have an insight that you need to quit your job and go pursue your life passion, for instance. That's fantastic, and you should probably do that in time, but don't call your boss directly after the trip. Integrate the experience properly so that you can take the grounded, wise action and not act from an emotional place of rashness. You can figure the details out. It'll all depend on your exact experience, but just as a general rule, just to unconfuse things, just give yourself 24 hours purely to integrate the experience before taking life actions. Meditation is something I wanted to touch on as well. It's very obvious, I suppose, if you're going to watch this channel, that I'm a fan of meditation, and I recommend it in all life situations. But with 5-MeO DMT, if you meditate before and after the trip, you're really going to increase the depth to which your transformation happens. Because although a lot of shifts do happen, even in your nervous system, during the 5-MeO DMT trip, huge more amounts, by far the bulk of the transformation, can happen before and afterwards. Mostly afterwards, I suppose. If you deeply meditate and sort of just reflect on the experience, get back in touch with that vibration, and then your body sort of, on a deep level, shifts more towards this nature of universal love. And meditating beforehand is good as well because it sort of just focuses the mind on where you are at that present moment, so that when you take the substance, all the surface layer stuff isn't so important. You've already dealt with that in sober meditation beforehand. So then when you take the substance, you can really go deeper and open a new space, as opposed to just having insights about daily life. You can have insights of daily life in the sober meditation and then go meta to that, deeper than that, during your 5-MeO experience. I also want to mention trip sitters, because most people recommend taking 5-MeO with a trip sitter, and I would totally agree with that. But a lot of people, for whatever reason, don't have access to a trustworthy trip sitter, a friend that they really trust. And if that's your case, then you can still proceed with taking 5-MeO DMT, but it stresses very much then, I very much stress that you need to start with a low dose and ramp up more slowly so that you really get in touch with the substance. And in general, just stick with lower doses if you're doing it alone, if you don't have access to a trip sitter. Now, also something I want to mention is, I think it's actually very important, is the content that you're going to be watching for the days leading up to your first 5-MeO experience is important. It will make a big difference. And we all know that you can you're choosing what you're watching on the internet or on TV, and it would be best to choose the spirituality themed content or just wholesome content that seems good and upright, and to avoid the things that you know you shouldn't really be watching or that seem unhealthy, that are just garbage really, or just gruesome horror movies, you know. It's best to stay away from that before your trip. It's best to stay away from that in general, but particularly leading up to your trip, just prefer the best content you can possibly find, and that will bubble up during your trip instead of the negative stuff. Also, just very quickly, I could have added this in my setting section actually, but I want to mention that it's good to take a shower before your trip, because that refreshes the body, but it also just refreshes the mind, sort of as a symbolic gesture. You're washing away all of your karma, all of your issues before you're going into the trip, so that you have just a clean slate, a clean sight to experience this with. And then lastly, the tip that you probably hear most of all from everyone that has done 5-MeO, all over the internet you can find this tip, is in terms of food and having an empty stomach. Try not to eat or even drink a lot right before the trip. Give your stomach time to process whatever's in there. So I would say wait at least 4 hours after eating before taking 5-MeO and half an hour before drinking. And also I would suggest not eating meat for a few days beforehand, so that you have no meat in your digestive system anywhere, because it's just heavier in nature. It's more work for your stomach to deal with. And the 5-MeO DMT trip, in my experience and a lot of people's, it does have a lot of bodily energy to it, gut energy to it. And a lot of insight that people have, for instance, on psychedelics, is that they want to stop eating animals. And it can induce negative feelings if you've got literal animal flesh in your body. So it's best to just stay away from meat and be light as possible, and to have as much mental clarity as possible. Well, those are it for the tips, and now we're moving on to the last section of the video. You're almost ready to go, ladies and gentlemen. The last piece of the puzzle is intention. Now, this is really important because an intention helps guide you along the way, both subconsciously, but also during the come up. A lot of people experience fast heart beating and the mind can come in with doubts. So it's good to be able to verbally and with a gesture tell your body, mind, soul, being, all of it, what your intention is and where you want to go. Now, to clarify, for me, I think you want to be setting an intention in terms of theme, not content. Because on a 5-MeO trip, you can't really control the content, and I wouldn't recommend trying to do so. Go along with the journey, open up to the journey, but you want to be experiencing the content through a certain set of eyes, which is your intention. So for example, let's say you have an intention of opening up to love and beauty. Now, the 5-MeO DMT trip could take you many places. For instance, it could take you back to a childhood memory, or it could take you literally to heaven, or it could take you to work, or some very abstract space that has no bearing on normal reality at all. If it takes you back to a childhood memory that is traumatic, for instance, then you can open up with love and beauty, see it through those eyes, and really allow healing to happen. If you go to heaven, then you can experience that with love and beauty and just enjoy it. If you experience a work situation through love and beauty, then you could open yourself up to inspiration as to how to respond, no matter what the exact content is. Or if it's an abstract space, opening up to love and beauty, that can make the experience very beautiful and loving instead of alienating. Now, it's important for you to find your own sincere, genuine intention, and not to just decide one of the examples I'm going to list off. But some common examples is you could open up to, as I said, love and beauty. You can open up to God and truth. You can open up to Christ and the white light. You can open up to Shiva or Saraswati or Lakshmi or whatever Hindu god you choose. Or you could open up to the Buddha. You can open up to peace and joy. You can open up to nature. Have I missed any? You can open up to divinity. You can open up to really anything that you like. Now, I would recommend, if you're already doing a spiritual practice, 5-MeO DMT can really allow you to blossom all that work that has been going on within you. So choosing a word that resonates with your spiritual practice can really help just bring forth into your experience all the background stuff that's been happening with your spiritual practice. So if you're doing a spiritual practice, I highly recommend incorporating that into your first experience by choosing a word to open up to for an intention. Now, you might have noticed every time I say open up to whatever, love and beauty, I recommend verbalizing it, maybe in your head if you're around other people, but saying it, those sound waves really helps. But also do this gesture. It's almost like a mudra, and it really does help. You'll be surprised if you pay attention how much it helps to put your hands together like this, open up with your fingers touching like so, and then to say, I'm opening up to love and beauty. It really helps a lot, and I thoroughly recommend doing that. But with that, we are probably at the end of the video. I just want to end by saying that if you have a sincere intention here, genuine wanting just to experience goodness, to improve yourself so that you may help the world in a better way, then I am very, very confident that you're going to have a wonderful experience.